Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new here, my name is Chris Hong and I'm an artist and I make art related YouTube videos. It's 2024 and I am thrilled to be sharing my first illustration of the year with you all. I decided to turn this old drawing that I did back in maybe as early as late 2017 or in 2018 into an illustration, and it is a sad looking clown character holding a teddy bear for comfort. I've always liked this drawing and it seemed, at least to me, that it resonated with other people as well. I have seen a lot of people do redraws of it and studies of it. It's always held a special place in my heart, so I wanted to finally revisit it after all these years and turn it into an illustration. I did a color comp to try and figure out the lighting and the colors. I imagined the lighting to be coming from below, but in terms of the colors, I wasn't exactly sure what the colors were going to be, so I was kind of torn between the two. And you'll eventually see what I ended up with. I decided to paint this using acrylics like watercolors and also bring in some color pencils. I used this approach for my illustration titled Love Me or Fight Me. I have a video of it on my channel. So to start, I went ahead and laid down a thin wash of blue all over, basically establishing a direction for the color palette since I'll be working in translucent layers. So basically, I use the acrylics like it is watercolor. I have like the heavy body golden brand acrylics and I water it down pretty thinly. The only thing is I have to work pretty fast, otherwise the pool of pigment will settle very quickly, and I am going from like a darker blue near the top and gradually getting lighter below because I'm imagining the lighting coming from below. Figuring out the lighting is definitely a guessing game for me. I don't always know what I'm doing, to be honest, but I just tell myself that, logically, if the light is coming from below, then shadows will be cast above, and I try to draw it in a way that looks like it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't look good and I don't follow through with it because I want to prioritize design overall, first and foremost, above being correct. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense as long as it looks designed in an intentional way and it looks aesthetically pleasing. There's some sort of directionality with the lighting. So at this stage, because I am working very wet on wet, I decide to play around with creating some splatters in the background to help provide some texture. And I feel like adding these kind of textural elements help make the backgrounds feel like they have a bit of like a sense of space, because when you treat the background pretty flatly, then it kind of looks like the character is up against like wallpaper almost. I personally have a hard time making more of these kind of spontaneous marks in my work, especially when I get further into the painting's progress. I'm just more timid about making marks like that, so I try to incorporate it early on in the process. So before I started working on this illustration, I was actually working on another piece with the same approach using acrylics like watercolors, but unfortunately I just kind of gave up on that one, at least for now. Maybe I will return to it later, but I did take some key takeaways from that experience that I made a note to just like take into and apply to this one to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that I had in that previous illustration. And one of the takeaways was to do more of these kinds of background mark making earlier on in the process as opposed to trying to fit it in later, because I just have a hard time incorporating it later once the painting is more built up and there's just more paint, I mean, it's physically harder because you're fighting the medium at that point, and there's probably buildup of paint and textures, and it's like mentally harder because you get precious about it. You don't want to like ruin what's on the page. So yeah, one of the takeaways was to try to not leave figuring out the background to the end. And now I am addressing the local colors. So still working as translucently as possible in that I am adding very minimal white so that I can work as thinly as possible to keep the piece as malleable as possible early on. I feel like at this point the colors were starting to feel kind of muddy, and I felt that I was noodling a bit. So I felt like now is the time to start bringing in the color pencils. And this is another takeaway that I had from that failed illustration that I was working on prior to this one, which is that I need to start bringing in color pencils earlier on in the process to regain control of the drawing. Why early? Because early on in the process, the paint isn't as built up. It will apply more smoothly and it won't skip as much, and create like a grainy texture, which I really don't like. And also, I'm realizing that I need to constantly kind of check in and make sure my drawing is not just kind of going out of whack. Otherwise, I will just kind of aimlessly noodle forever in the rendering. And also, I use the color pencils to try to bring back the colors that felt a bit lost. Similarly to what happens in watercolor, if you just keep adding colors together, it's going to eventually create mud. It's going to lose like the hue and saturation of the color. So I made a note to try to bring the color pencils in early on in the process to try to bring those colors back. And it's easier to do so early on in the process because the surface is not quite as built up as it will be later on. And going in with the color pencils, I really focused first on the face because the face is the most important part, the face of the character as well as the teddy bear. I feel like color pencil process footage is really not as satisfying to watch when it's so sped up because the change happens in such a subtle and incremental way, especially for me because I use it so lightly usually to just like nudge the colors around and nudge the values. But trust me when I say that bringing in color pencils makes such a huge difference for me in how I'm able to kind of wrangle the drawing and the colors back to the right direction. And it really affects how I feel about the piece overall, since I feel like I'm finally back in control of how the piece is turning out. So I'm very grateful for color pencils, and I am trying to not shy away from using it earlier on in the process, because something that I am kind of exploring lately is the idea of approaching these illustrations in a more sketching kind of mindset. And that's because I often feel like I like my sketches way more than some of my finished illustrations. There's a quality to my drawings and sketches that I just cannot seem to replicate in finished illustrations. So if I can make my illustration process mimic my sketching process more and try to stay in a sketching kind of mindset while making these illustrations, then maybe I can try to marry the two and there won't be as much of a discrepancy. And to this point, another takeaway that I had since the last illustration is to incorporate the finishing marks earlier on in the process. I like to think of it as finishing marks or special effects, just like elements in a piece that help make the illustration feel finished and complete, and it kind of ties it all together in a nice way. It's like a cherry on the top kind of a thing. Incorporate those marks that I usually leave until the very, very end for a lot of my paintings. Bring that in, try to incorporate it earlier on in the process. And doing it earlier on in the process will help me see if it's even going to work or not, if it's going to actually help make the piece feel finished. So as you saw me do in my Love Me or Fight Me process video, I overlaid tracing paper to try and map out these background elements. I wasn't really sure what I wanted, but in my mind and in my color columns, I imagined some kind of layering of some shapes like stars, diamonds, and circles. I just wanted there to be these kind of large geometric shapes in front and behind the character to create a sense of depth. So I ended up going with mostly stars and circles, and I drew a little like sparkly accents around the character. And then once I kind of figured that out, I went in with colored pencils and lightly drew them in. And I didn't stick very strictly to the tracing paper plan at all. Honestly, I think the tracing paper is more for me to kind of warm up and get a feel for where I want to place these elements. If I were to put in these kinds of marks blindly or like cold, I would definitely be a lot more nervous about it, because it means I have to paint over top of it, and painting over top, it's not the end of the world, but it means it's more work than is necessary. I don't know why I'm so trepidatious about it sometimes. I wish I had more confidence in my ability to figure out where to place things, and with more confidence and without worrying too much about messing things up. I was really happy that I did this step, and I feel like these elements do help make the picture feel more finished, and it made me be able to see the finish line much sooner. Going back to acrylics now to start committing to some of the decisions I've made. I think mostly I focused on darkening the background since I felt it was a bit light in value. I knew I wanted the teddy bear to be the lightest value in the picture overall, as if it's emitting light, to give it that kind of magical feel. So that is what guided me to darken the rest of the background in contrast. I figured that since the teddy bear is the focal point and the whole kind of shtick of the picture, I need to start bringing the teddy bear to a finish. So it sets the benchmark for how finished the rest of the picture is going to look. So I went in and started building up the fuzzy texture of the teddy bear by finally bringing in more white and working more opaquely. And it really allowed me to correct the lighting and the colors, because the teddy bear was starting to look really muddy. And I feel like this was actually a decided turning point for me in the illustration. Seeing the teddy bear in its more like finished final form, it helped me see the rest of the picture in relation to it, and thus help gauge how far I needed to bring up the other parts of the picture. And yeah, I just really like how the teddy bear ended up looking, so it just made me feel better about the piece. And yeah, that's what I need to do. I can't give up. I see the finish line. I just need to keep going. I just need to bring the rest of it to a higher level of finish. So at this point, I was pretty happy with how the illustration was coming out, and I became fairly certain that it was going to be finished. I wanted to punch up the background a bit for more drama around the character and the teddy bear's faces, so that the contrast in value will help draw the eyes more to the characters. Again, I kept going back and forth with the color pencils and the acrylics. With acrylics, it's easier to darken or lighten a larger area of the painting all at once, but it's a bit harder to control the colors individually. Otherwise, I have to just like mix a whole bunch of colors. Whereas with color pencils, it's easier to control the colors. So in the background, I would go in with the acrylics to adjust the values, and then also go over top of it with color pencils to bring out certain like pools of oranges and pinks and purples, so that it feels separate from one another and it's not all just like mixing into one muddy color. Now that the sky was mostly finished and I had settled on all the background elements in the picture, I felt that I needed to put in my last finishing touches, which would be stars along the line of the character's face to help draw the eyes towards the character. I unfortunately forgot to record the start of me putting in the stars, but I made a decision last minute to bring the stars in towards the face so that they could also read like tears or maybe even freckles. Once I went in with the acrylics for the stars, I bring back color pencils again and try to kind of diffuse the stars a little bit so they're not so stark like circles on the page, because I felt like that kind of looked kind of stamped on. Diffusing the borders of the stars and working them more into the background, I felt like that actually made them look more like stars. I think I may have gone a touch too far in adding a little too many stars maybe, but I really think these finishing touches help bring the picture together in the end. So here's the finished illustration that I think I am calling my teddy bear. I'm not sure that it's exactly how I envisioned it in my head when I drew the drawing back in 2017 or 2018, but I do like where it ended up after all these years in 2024. And I am really happy with how controlled I was with the lighting and the colors, because I feel like the lighting situation here is a little tricky. I wanted it to feel like a nighttime scene in a dark setting, but I didn't want the values to be too dark because I wanted the colors to be mostly in the like middle range and pastel. I actually really like how the colors ended up in the end. I'll be making prints of this piece for the upcoming Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle next month, where I'll be attending. I'm very excited for it. And I'll eventually have it listed on my shop as well, so please go check that out. I'll let you know when it's there. I'm really happy to add another clown to my world, and I hope you guys like her too. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!